9 out of 10 times when you hear the word passive income on the internet, it's a scam. But this is that one time someone on the internet's actually looking out for you. What's up, guys? Welcome back to WallStreet Wealthy. I'm your host, SP-Waran, and this week I'm very excited to be discussing with you AMM yield farming and passive income. I know browsing around on the internet, you've seen plenty of get-rich-quick schemes and scams because that's all that's around, and I'm here to cut all the BS when it comes to passive income. I guarantee you nothing in this video will make you a millionaire overnight, but if you follow tips and tricks sprinkled throughout the video, I can assure you you can build passive income safely, build generational wealth, and get one step closer to becoming Wall Street wealthy. Today, we're going to be discussing all about crypto yield farming. To be specific, we're going to discuss about AMMs. Automated Market Makers. Today's video is going to be split up into 5 different sections. At any time during the video, feel free to skip between the sections popping up in the timeline below. So let's get started by first answering the question, what is an AMM yield farm? So the best way to answer this question is actually by first understanding how trading works in the conventional markets. When you buy long or sell short a stock in a regular stock market, you're actually betting against a giant order book of all the other buyers and sellers in that market. This order book is formed by financial intermediaries called centralized exchanges. A popular one in the United States is the New York Stock Exchange. Somewhere between 2015 and 2016, a completely new form of investing started taking root. They called it AMM yield farming. In the conventional stock market, when you bet on the New York Stock Exchange, you're betting on an order book of buyers and sellers. But with AMM yield farming in the DeFi space, you're actually betting against a liquidity pool. So now that we know with AMMs you're betting against a liquidity pool, many of you are probably wondering, what is a liquidity pool? A liquidity pool is a smart contract that lives on the blockchain. You can consider it a large pool of money secured by blockchain technology. The liquidity pool is composed of money staked by investors in the form of LP tokens. LP tokens, or liquidity provider tokens, are tokens created by combining a native ecosystem token with a non-native ecosystem token to provide liquidity for that pair. By providing liquidity for that pair, you're able to receive a kickback on the transaction fees collected by the AMM yield farm. This process of staking these LP tokens to receive the yield is known as AMM yield farming. If liquidity providers add or remove capital, the smart contract is able to adjust the token's value based on how much liquidity was added or removed to the pool. Now that we've successfully covered the basics of what a yield farm is, we can begin to understand what it's not. Many experts in the DeFi space often confuse a yield farm with a decentralized exchange, or a DEX. The reason this happens is because a lot of DEXs provide yield farming as a service, but not all yield farms are actually DEXs. I know this is a little confusing, so I'll explain a little better. A DEX can be seen as the engine behind any yield farm. It's basically the financial intermediary that allows the buyers and the sellers to bet against that order book, the pool of liquidity provider tokens. Now, since most DEXs have their own native token, they're able to provide yield farming as a service. Most yield farms don't have the resources to become their own DEX, so they just end up choosing a DEX to provide their services on. These yield aggregators need not be a DEX when they start because they can just use the services of an already existing DEX. This is what most often happens with all these crypto moonshot projects that you see coming out every single day. The last key difference I'd like to point out between an AMM yield farm and a DEX is that a DEX services an array of tokens, sometimes spanning over multiple chains, while an AMM yield farm focuses solely on a single or maybe 2 native tokens. So now that we've covered the basics of AMM yield farming and distinguished yield farms from DEXs, we're able to move on to part 2, where we understand what exactly is an LP token and why is that process necessary. The best way to understand what exactly is an LP token and how to trade it is by comparing it to a short straddle. If you've ever traded in conventional markets, an LP token can be viewed as a short straddle. A short straddle is a strategy by which investors bet on low volatility. In conventional markets, this is done by buying a call option and a put option at the exact same strike price with the same expiration date. People do this to bet on the market flatlining. You would make money if the stock doesn't go up too much or down too much but stays about the same. The same is true with LP tokens. The best time to get into yield farming and create an LP token is actually when you expect a period of low volatility up ahead for both counterparts of the LP token. By now, some of you are probably wondering, why do we even need LP tokens and why is that process necessary? The best way to answer this question is actually with another question. Let's ask ourselves, why do AMMs and yield farms pay investors to create LP tokens? The reason is you need an LP token in order for an ecosystem to function. An LP token acts as the bridge between a country's native currency like the US dollar and that crypto token. For example, an LP token with BUSD allows the user to change their US dollars into BUSD and then into that token. That LP token is the virtual bridge between currencies traded in the real world and cryptocurrencies traded on the internet. Without that LP token, no one will be able to buy or sell that crypto token. Time for Pro Tips with SP-Waran. Because of the large number of moving variables, a lot of people are scared of the DeFi space and completely shun crypto investing. But with these pro tips, I'll teach you how to make an LP token safely and make money off of it. Number one rule is never trust the numbers on a DeFi site. Because these sites are not regulated by the SEC, they often accidentally miscalculate numbers. This means often the APY or the APR seen on yield farming websites is miscalculated on purpose and inflated. The best way to find out what the real APR you're getting and the real value of your LP tokens is actually by checking a site like vfat.tools. By using a site like vfat.tools, not only are you able to know the exact dollar value of your LP token, but you're also able to know exact APR and APY you would earn by providing liquidity to that protocol. And if you use vfat.tools to supplement your research from dex.guru, which is a website that allows you to monitor pool activity, you're able to be on the top echelon of investors that are able to monitor accurate real-time data. To make it super easy for you, I've left all the resources used by WallStreet Wealthy in the description box down below. You're welcome. Rule number 2 when it comes to investing in LP tokens. Never create an LP token between two small crypto projects. By creating an LP token between two small projects, you're subjecting your capital to an extreme amount of volatility. Oftentimes, the master chef smart contracts behind these LP tokens crash or take forever to respond, just because of the volatile nature of both counterparty assets. This brings us to our third and final rule. Never marry the token, never marry the project. One mistake I see most investors make is they get too attached to a crypto project or even an LP token. Some users feel an attachment to that LP token process and tend to think twice or even 3 times before un-LPing a token, wondering if whether it's the right decision. Well, let me make it simple for you. Anytime you expect a period of great volatility up ahead, which is a lot of times in crypto, it's the perfect time to un-LP your tokens. So now that we've understood what a yield farm is, and we've understood the basics behind an LP token and received some tips on how to value these LP tokens, we can move on to understanding some of the risks behind DeFi yield farming and making passive income through crypto. Knowing how an AMM yield farm works is not enough. You need to know the risks behind yield farming. We're going to divide discussing the risks behind yield farming into 3 different categories. First, we'll talk about impermanent loss, then transition into harvest lockups before finally concluding with rug pulls. So first, what is impermanent loss? The best way to understand what impermanent loss is actually with a real-life example. Let's create a fictional character called Trader Joe. Now let's say Trader Joe wanted to provide liquidity to PancakeSwap. He decides to make Cake BUSD LP tokens. Now, Trader Joe creates his LP tokens, sticks them in a farm, and then 3 weeks later he hears that cake just shot up 100%. Trader Joe's very excited and he runs back to his portfolio to only find 50% of gains. So where did the other 50% go? Cake did shoot up 100%, and that information was not incorrect. Well, that 50% that's lost due to creating the LP token is known as impermanent loss. Why does it occur? Because when Joe created his LP token, he agreed to take 50% of his portfolio and put it into cake, and the other 50% and put it into BUSD. Because only 50% of the LP token is composed of cake, it only holds that amount of weight when it comes to your profit. That's why on a 100% gain, BUSD padded the other 50%, causing 50% impermanent loss. The definition of impermanent loss on the internet tends to be confusing. That is why I created my own layman's definition of the term impermanent loss. Impermanent loss can be simply defined as the unexpected loss faced by an investor when LPing a token. This is the unexpected loss due to one token's value changing in the opposite direction of the LP counterpart. Now let's move on to talk about harvest lockups. Harvest lockups do exactly as they say. They lock up your harvested yield. When a user stakes his tokens in a DeFi protocol, he expects to be paid yield in real time. Many of these DeFi protocols are malicious and don't even advertise that they have a harvest lockup. The only way to be sure is to go to their Gitbooks and check. Before investing in the DeFi space, make sure to DYOR, do your own research. Make sure to go into the Gitbooks and read whether the DeFi protocol you're investing in has a harvest lockup. Keep in mind, harvest lockups comes in all different forms of shapes and sizes. The most popular of harvest lockups vary from locking up your harvest from the time of you entering your farm to some even locking up from the time the project was launched. Projects even have harvest lockups that lock up your LP tokens, so be very careful in what type of project you're investing, since several projects even have malicious intent. This brings us to our third and final point regarding the risks associated with investing in DeFi. The third point is actually the biggest concern investors have when dealing with the DeFi space, and it's what often steers people away from yield farming as a passive income source. This issue is what's known as rug pulls. A rug pull is when the owner of a crypto project has malicious intentions and decides to run away with all the investors' money. How is this possible, you may ask? Well, the developers behind every crypto project have complete control over designing their smart contracts. WallStreet Wealthy encourages you to pay attention to every smart contract you decide to interact with. If you see a code titled migrator code, that's exactly the type of code that's used by these malicious developers to rug pull projects. So now you're probably wondering, how do I avoid a rug pull? Well, it's easy to avoid rug pull projects, especially with WallStreet Wealthy's 3 helpful tips. First is be wary of APRs. With very high APRs, I'd often like to point out high risk equals high reward. The reason the APRs are set so high is because no rational investor is willing to invest in that project. That is why they're willing to pay you crazy amounts of money for staking for such a short time. Keep in mind, usually the higher the APR, the more risk you're involved in. The second tip we have to avoid rug pull projects is to only invest in projects with doxed owners. In crypto, it's often hard to find a project with a fully doxed team. But if you want to be sure that your project will not be rug pulled, then the best way is to only invest in projects with a public team. The third tip I have for you is something you should have been doing already. It's part of DYOR. It's making sure that the DeFi protocol you're interested in has a smart contract audit done by one of the leading smart contract audit firms. The two leading firms are Certic and TechRate. Just because the DeFi protocol had a smart contract audit done does not mean that it passed its smart contract audit. What you want to do is open up the smart contract audit and pay attention to red and orange flags. Red flags mean you should not invest in the project, while orange flags mean further research has to be done. A good idea is to contact the developers of the project. The cool thing about decentralized finance is that it takes the hierarchy system out of a company's structure, which means that you're able to talk with the founders and CEOs of DeFi protocols if you just join their Telegram or Discord. This is a very good strategy and should be part of your daily research. Now this finally brings us to part 4 of the video, which I like to call legal counsel. I encourage you to check your local laws before investing in AMM yield farms. Especially for those living in the United States, a majority of AMM yield farms are actually illegal to invest in because they have not been registered with the SEC. Keep in mind, AMM yield farms are a financial instrument. They provide a security, and if it has not been listed with the SEC, as a US citizen, it is illegal for you to partake in those investing activities. It's a really good idea to verify that you're not violating any local laws before investing in your first yield farm. Another important part of the legal counsel section I'd like to discuss is taxes. Yes, with cryptocurrency you must pay taxes. Just like any other investment, cryptocurrency is subject to capital gains tax, which can get really confusing. Especially with the process of yield farming and creating LP tokens, it can be very hard to keep track of your finances. For most people, this can be a huge problem when it comes to paying taxes. The best solution to this issue I would recommend is to create a trading log where you monitor entering and exiting LP tokens and how much USD value that translates into. The last part of the legal counsel section I wanted to discuss are the risks of using a VPN. Personally, I know several investors that use VPN to be able to trade yield farms from countries where they're restricted. I personally strongly advise against using VPNs to trade. This is because as cryptocurrency laws develop, you're actually having your funds at risk of being seized. Since your investing activities are in gray area right now and soon to be illegal, the government in your country and the host country of that VPN both have rights to seize your funds in case they detect malicious activity. This brings us to part 5 of the video, where we discuss how to find promising yield farm projects. I'll discuss some of my personal DYOR tips. Let's start by discussing what not to look for. Do not invest in yield farms that have been promoted recently on YouTube. This is because efficient markets react immediately to news, and chances are that you've already missed out on the hype. Another rule I keep close at heart is to never invest because of FOMO. FOMO stands for fear of missing out. This is the feeling you get when a token is skyrocketing and you feel like you can ride the wave by just getting in right now. This is the worst type of investment decision made by DeFi investors. This is because during moments of FOMO, the market acts completely irrational. The stock price can shoot up 50% and come crashing down 100% before you can even un-LP a token. Now you're probably wondering, how do I discover about these DeFi projects? Well, you can use an online resource called DApp Radar. DApp Radar is an online website that allows you to sort DeFi protocols by chain. You can sort by Ethereum, Binance, Polygon, Solana, and so on. Not only can you sort the projects by chain, but you can also sort projects by launch date. By sorting projects from newest to oldest, you're able to see the latest DeFi protocols that have been added to the blockchain. This is a really good resource if you're trying to invest in ICOs. A green flag to look for is a strong community. You want to be able to join the Telegram or Discord of a DeFi protocol and see that the community is live and vibrant. The final tip I have for you about entering AMM yield farms is about timing the entry. The best way to time your entry into an AMM yield farm is actually by conducting technical analysis on Bitcoin. The reason I use technical analysis on Bitcoin to make my investment decisions regarding yield farming is because most yield farms have a small market cap with very few actors. Technical analysis usually works far better and is more reliable with more actors in the market. Because Bitcoin is correlated to the entire crypto market, by doing predictive analytics on Bitcoin, we're actually able to predict price movements in our yield farming tokens. This is actually a strategy that I employ myself. So that about wraps it up for WallStreet Wealthy's introduction to AMM yield farming. I hope this video was able to add some value to your day. I'm your host SP-Waran, and I'll see you next time on WallStreet Wealthy.